Okay, the room is full. It's not quite 3 o'clock, but there's standing room only, so let's get started. Everybody keen? Yeah? Everybody excited about probate or the prospect of conducting probate services? There's one gentleman in the room I know who's already on the road to becoming accredited to do the probate work. Oops, I've just lost my slide because Sorry, let's start again. Slideshow from beginning. Right, that wasn't very good. I dropped my thing and it closed off my slide. So, anyway, welcome. Let's get started. We'll start with a little bit of an introduction about probate. I'm sure, as you're all here, that most of you are aware, last year, or not, year before last now, September 2014, ICAEW became authorized to accredit people to conduct what is otherwise a reserved legal service that is probate work. Now, I don't know if any of you have followed the press, but it took ages to get to this position, because obviously the lawyers were not particularly keen that we got an entrance into this work. But since September 2014, the doors were opened for ICAEW to accredit accountants to conduct the legal reserve service that is probate. Now, initially, when they first launched it, you had to be a chartered accountant. You had to be a qualified chartered accountant to become an authorized individual. Now, once they sorted their members out and got all their members on track and sort of entering into the process, they've widened it now to members of other accountancy bodies. So you do not have to be a chartered accountant now to get access to becoming an authorized individual, which will then in turn allow you to apply for accreditation. Now, as I said, probate itself is a reserved legal service. And when we are conducting this service, we are conducting a legal service. So as with lawyers, when we conduct this work, we get legal privilege on this work. It's the only work we will get it on, but we get it on this work because it is a legal service. Now, a lot of people ask, well, what is probate itself? And there is no actual definition of what constitutes probate. The only definition we can find actually comes from the Legal Services Act, and as you can see, it's basically the preparation of any probate papers on which to found or oppose a grant of probate or letters of administration. And I don't know if you can just about see, you won't read the detail of, but it's all about that one bit of paper that we are seeing there. It's about obtaining this piece of paper which entitles the personal representative, be they an executor or be they an administrator, to administer the estate of the deceased. And it's about obtaining that paper, filling in the paperwork to deal with that paper, which is the reserved legal service. Now, there are two routes to doing this. Most people will go down what's known as a personal application. I don't know if any of you in a personal capacity filled out a PA1 form. Now, I don't know if you've seen that form. It's a personal application. It basically supplies the probate registry with details of the next of kin and basically the information they need to draft the oath that is sworn by the personal representative. If you've not seen one of those forms, it is a particularly noddy form. There is nothing technical or complex in that form, but that was the form that we, if we aren't authorized to do so, cannot complete and charge a fee for doing so. Okay. So, a lot of practitioners, it's been a bit of a grey area as to how much you can do without actually obtaining a license or becoming authorized. Now, ICAEW, obviously as a regulator, wanted to sort of give much more guidance as to what you can do without a license. Because a lot of people say to me, and you'll see later on when we look at the fee structure, it's not an inexpensive process. Okay, you have to pay into the compensation scheme, you have to pay for your annual supervisory fees. But a lot of you, I'm assuming, do a lot of you already do estate administration work? Yeah? Hopefully, none of you are completing the papers to actually obtain the grant if you haven't got a license, because to do so is actually a criminal offence. So the ICAEW issued a regulatory advisory notice, which contains lists of what you can and cannot do with a license, what you can do if you are authorised to conduct probate work, and they've just updated it to include what you can do if you are personally appointed as an executor, but you're not operating within a licensed firm. Now, I'm going to go over some of the highlights of that in a moment, but if anybody wants a full copy of that, if you want to go to the SWAT stand at A860, we have some copies of this regulatory advisory that you can pick up and read at your leisure. But some edited highlights, and it's done sort of in terms of Q&A. Firstly, can I handle the whole process? i.e., can I do income tax to date of death? Can I fill in the IHT forms? Can I fill in the PA1 form? Can I swear the oath, etc.? Can I do the whole lot? If you have not got the accreditation, then no, you cannot. Because if you're not accredited, you can't extract or complete any papers to obtain the grant, because that's the reserved legal service, and to do that is a criminal offence if you are not authorised to do so. And certainly I used to, when I was going around and doing practice reviews with firms, I found certainly tax and trust departments that have been doing the whole shebang for years. And when we did our first courses, it was populated by people who've been doing it for years, realised that, oops, they might be on dodgy wicket now, and were regularising their position. Clearly, if you're authorised, you can do the whole lot. Now, if you are an executor, so you've been appointed as somebody's executor, but you are operating within an unlicensed firm, then again, you can carry out the process except for submitting the papers to obtain the grant, and except for swearing the oath, where you are charging. Now, I can't imagine you do estate administration and not charge. And there have been some commentators that suggested that you can do the estate administration and charge, and not charge for the rest of it. And I'm afraid that's been outlawed now, and this regulatory advisory has to be followed. Okay, because otherwise it's clearly defining the boundaries within which we can operate. So, you know, quickly running down this schedule, can I be proactive in the process? Well, if you're not licensed, no, you can't, because the whole process has to be managed and controlled by the personal representatives. If you're authorised, yes, you can. Clearly, if you are the personal representative, then you will drive the process. But can I complete the PA1? If you're not licensed, you can help the personal representatives complete the form, but you cannot submit it, because they have to manage and control the whole process. Now, I shouldn't say this, but how they'd know, nobody actually signs the forms, but it needs to be submitted by the personal representative. If you're authorised, then you can complete the PA1 form. And in fact, if you're authorised, you can act as an agent for the personal representatives, and the PA1 form is not required at all, because we basically prepare the oath for the personal representatives to swear, so we don't need the PA1 at all, which is what lawyers do. It's the same approach that lawyers take. Can you complete the IHT forms? Again, if you've not got a licence, you can fill the forms in, you can complete them, but they have to be submitted by the personal representatives. If you're authorised, again, you can do the whole process. If there's issues with the IHT returns, can you negotiate with the revenue? Well, again, without a licence, yes, within limits. It still has to be controlled by the personal representatives. With a licence, you can do the whole shebang. Sort of moving down to the penultimate one there, can I assemble the probate papers not without a licence? And again, it's clearly defining that where you have not got a licence, you are not running, managing, controlling the application process, because that is the reserved legal activity that you cannot do. Oh, no, sorry, it's gone again. Okay, let's move on. So if we're not charging a fee for doing this work, then we can do the whole thing because it's a personal appointment. If you want to charge a fee and you want to do the whole lot, you would need to look at obtaining a license or becoming an authorized firm. A lot of people say to me, well, why do we need to do the whole thing? Why would you do the whole thing? And we've conducted a survey in conjunction with ICAEW when we were asking members, those that are already accredited to do the work, and there are 198 firms now that are accredited to do this work and more in the pipeline, why do they want to do it? And by far, the biggest response was that we want to give a holistic approach. We want to be able to go from cradle to grave. Now, I run the SWAT probate project, and in putting together our course material, we taught to contentious probate lawyers. As accountants, we can only deal with non-contentious probate. If there's a contention, it goes to be dealt with by the contentious probate lawyers, who generally do not deal with non-contentious stuff. When it's dealt with, it comes back to us. The guy that we spoke to firmly believes that in 10 years, accountants are going to be doing the majority of probate work because our skill set is much more aligned with the work required to extract the grant. Has anybody seen IHT computations produced by a lawyer? Sorry, any lawyers in the room before I say that? No, but I mean, if you've seen IHT computations produced by lawyers, have you seen estate accounts produced by lawyers? They can be atrocious. The other thing with us as accountants is that we have an ongoing relationship with our clients. We nurture them, we look after them, whereas lawyers are very much transaction driven. So we tend to know our clients so much better, and we have a constant rapport with them. One person who actually filled in our survey said it's actually more interesting than completing a VAT return. So, you know, it's just a new area of work. Some firms have said, well, it's filling the gap that audit used to have or used to exist within. So I think, as I say, generally most firms want to do it because it gives the, you know, you're able then to give the whole service. And certainly when it comes to estate planning, do any of you already do will writing? Is anybody doing will writing? Yeah, we don't tend to find many accountants doing will writing, but certainly we would advise that you collate all the information in accordance with your tax planning so that you can then give it to the lawyer to put into legal speak. But clearly, one of the things you want is you in as there as executor rather than the lawyer. So why do it? A lot of people, as I say, it's that holistic approach. It's being able to provide the whole range of services rather than saying, I can do this bit, but hang on, I have to hand this bit over to the lawyers. As I've said, as accountants, we can only do non-contentious probate. Most lawyers only do non-contentious probate. One of the skills you would need to acquire is to be able to identify when things are becoming contentious. And generally speaking, it's where people are challenging a will. Maybe they don't believe it's the last will. Maybe they believe it was made under duress. Maybe they believe the person didn't have capacity to make the will. Maybe it's, for example, an intestacy case where you've got a couple that have lived together for years, never married, never made a will, but the cohabitee has no entitlement under the law to the estate assets. I have run the course where we did have a gentleman that had separated from his wife years ago, never divorced her because they didn't want to pay the money, never got round to it, but had been cohabiting with somebody else, never made a will. Hadn't realised that his current partner gets nothing if he hadn't made a will. He did rush out a coffee break and make an appointment with his lawyer. So we are only allowed to do non-contentious probate work. Now, a lot of the requirements, a lot of the hoops that we have to jump through to demonstrate that we are suitable to carry out this work are currently within your ethical standards anyway. You need to have a robust complaints procedure. I'm sure you've all got that. Hopefully it's not used very often, but you've all got one of those. You've got to be competent. Now, we'll talk at how you demonstrate competence in a moment, but there will be an ongoing requirement for CPD. You have to have a minimum level of PI insurance. The minimum level for probate work, 500,000. Now, initially, people got very excited about PI insurance. They thought the insurers are going to charge us huge amounts extra for doing this service. Now, there are one or two insurers who shy away from it, but generally speaking, following Institute's negotiations, the PI insurers are not charging much, if anything more, for adding this service to the raft of services that you are already covered. Now, the whole reason we're able to do this is because the Legal Services Act was about broadening access to justice. And if you do apply, you have to include within your application a statement explaining why you becoming able to do this work improves access to justice for the public. So maybe there's no local lawyer, or it's giving greater choice. We need to include a statement. The other weird one is that Legal Services Board actually monitors the diversity of everybody offering legal services. It's not something we've done in the accountancy profession before. But again, as part of the application, we have to provide diversity information about our workforce providing legal services. Now, the Institute's got a rather extensive questionnaire about diversity, covering things like ethnicity, age, socio-economic background, sexual preference. You don't have to answer that. Gender, apparently there are 3, which I never appreciated. But that, you have to gather this information. And that has to be supplied to ICAW, because they then have to forward a summary through to the Legal Services Board. So those are some of the requirements. Now, when it comes to your firms and how you operate when providing probate services, firms have 2 choices. They can either become an authorised firm, whereby everybody within the firm is authorised to conduct, or all the principals within the firm are authorised to conduct probate work. So if you're a sole practitioner, you will be an authorised firm. Now, there aren't many accountancy practices that want to become authorised unless they are a sole practitioner. Some firms are actually setting up separate practices to deal with probate, and they are becoming authorised practices. But most firms become licensed. And within a licensed firm, you need one principal to become an authorised individual, and then others within the firm can also become authorised. But we must have one principal who is an authorised individual. Once you are accredited, you will be regulated by ICAW for probate work. So they will come out and do practice assurance reviews looking at probate work. They, again, have had to give assertions to the Legal Services Board that they're going to monitor their members properly. And I have known that firms that have been accredited and been notified by ICAW that they're going to have a regulatory review even before they've done any regulatory work. Now, actually, if I was going to have a regulatory review, I think that's probably a good time to have it. But in terms of their review, they're not looking at how good the work you do is. What they're doing is looking at the risk management processes and procedures that you have in place to control this work. And once you are authorised, this will extend to estate administration work as well. Licensed firms, which by far are the majority of firms that are going through, I've already said they must have one principal that's authorised. If there are any non-authorised principals that have a material interest in the practice, and that's more than a 10% interest, they have to be approved by ICAW. That's another form to fill in, but generally speaking, it's a rubber stamping exercise. It's not a difficult one. The firms have to be fit and proper. Now, any of you deal with solicitors? Any good of you got solicitor clients? Because again, when the Legal Services Act came in, they had to appoint a head of legal practice, and they had to appoint a head of finance and administration. Licensed firms will have to do the same. The head of legal practice will be an authorised principal. Head of Finance and Admin, which is basically ensuring that client money and client assets are kept securely and in accordance with regs, doesn't have to be. You have to have an office in England and Wales, and if you've got other principals who aren't ICAW members, they will need to become ICAW affiliates. Any of you, well, I'm sure all of you have money laundering processes and procedures. Do you have any of you DPB licensed for investment business? Anybody hold a DPB license? In the DPB regime, we set out prohibition notices telling staff that they can't give investment advice. We would need to do a similar exercise with probate for those staff who aren't authorised to conduct probate activities. And I've already mentioned our minimum PI requirements. Now, how do you become accredited? Now, there are 3 routes in. The first route is for ICAW members. So if you're an institute member, then the route in is designed as a top-up to your ICAW qualification. And that is the course that we at SWAT run. And basically, it's a 2-day course, and you then have to sit a 2-hour assessment at the end of it. It's not too bad, is it? No, the course itself, I quite enjoy. It's quite good fun. I think with the course, the key thing is its breadth of information rather than depth, because the idea is to demonstrate a basic level of competence and knowledge into probate and the tax. It's split 60% in favour of the probate legal side, 40% on the tax side. Now, if you're a tax whiz, and I know some of you in here are tax experts, and perhaps you've done lots of IHT, the pass mark for the exam is only 50%. So if you get 100% on the tax, you've only got to get 10% on the other side. So hopefully not too onerous. Some of you might be looking at putting together alternative business structures, maybe going into practice with a lawyer. So if you have somebody else who is authorised by another regulatory body, for example, the Law Society, they can go in through Route 41B. Route 41C is for non-institute members, and that's all about being able to demonstrate that you have the necessary competence. Any of you STEP members? Yes, so those of you that are STEP members, depending on which diploma you've done and when you qualified, you may get a free route in that way. Most others with other qualifications will need to top it up again by doing our course and our assessment. And at the moment, SWAT is the only, I'm afraid, the only provider of this training. So you need to set the attend the course, sit the exam and pass the assessment, and the majority of people do pass, I have to say. We don't have that many failures. Although I don't say it, I'm actually quite glad when we do, because it means our process works properly. But that's the route to become an authorised individual. And then the application process, it is a bit of a paper mountain exercise. I don't know if anybody's looked. Sorry, I can't hear you at the moment. Could you ask me at the end if that's okay? There's just too much background noise. There is a raft of paperwork that needs to be completed. So you will need to apply for the firm. Authorised individuals need to apply and become accredited to do the work. If we have non-ICAW principals, they need to become affiliates of the ICAW. We need to appoint the heads of legal practice, the heads of finance and administration, and non-authorised owners will have to fill in a form. It is a mountain of paper, I know, but hopefully the end product is worth it in terms of the extra work that can be generated as a result of this new service. As I mentioned at the beginning, it is not an inexpensive process either. There are fees that have to be paid, and the fee is dependent on the type of license or authorization that you have and the number of principals within the firm. And I've just, included an extract there. So if we're a sole practitioner, you're going to be paying £350 to become authorized, plus £350 to the ICAW compensation scheme. And then, depending on the number of principals, then the ranges of fees go up proportionately. You can obtain all this information from the ICAW website at icaw.com/probate. Okay, so you can very easily, it's actually quite an easy website to negotiate, and you can access the forms and more information about the costs involved. Now, clearly there is cost involved, and the one thing I would say from all those firms that have already become accredited, by far the most successful ones are those that have prepared well for it and have put a lot of effort into marketing the service. I think if we don't market it, if we don't publicise it, it will be a slow burn. Now, as I say, a lot of people, it's almost like having the audit licence as a bit of an insurance policy. We want it there so that we can use it if necessary. But there are firms out there that have really pushed this and are turning over well in excess of £150,000 from probate work. So if we do go about it in a structured way, it can be a lucrative income stream. So how do we need to promote, or what should we need to do to promote this service? Certainly press releases when you first become accredited. I would not approach it from the point of view, this is my firm and this is what we can do now. It needs to be more punchy than that. It needs to be, we're the first firm licensed in Hull to do this work. New opportunity for accountants. Push the holistic approach, the cradle to grave approach. So press releases are vital. Create a champion within the firm who can talk very knowledgeably and enthusiastically about your probate service. And certainly, I would recommend making sure everybody within the firm understands that you do this work, including the receptionists or those that answer the phone. We've done sort of mystery shopper exercises with the firms in the past, and this was something very basic, like ringing up about a business startup. And the lady on the phone answered, and you know, we pretended to be a business startup, saying, "Oh, we're interested. Do you help business startups?" "Oh, no, we don't do that sort of thing." And that was the receptionist. So clearly we need to make sure everybody in the firm understands that we do this type of work. You need to place adverts, but a one-off is not enough. This needs to be a drip feed. It needs to be done regularly. Do we all have news wires? Do we all prepare news wires and those sort of things for clients? Case studies, examples of how it's worked well. Articles about things that are happening in the probate world. Just constantly just keeping it in there so clients are reminded that we do now offer this service. I'm assuming you all have websites and you use those as your shop window. So clearly we need detail on the website about this new service. Again, an exciting press release saying that we now offer this service. But again, testimonials, examples, and then details of what you can and cannot do. Clearly, you're going to use leaflets and mailings, seminars and events. Do you run seminars for clients? Okay, so introducing this new service and, you know, target it to clients. You probably wouldn't target it to the 25-year-olds, although you might want them to create a will and you to be put in as an executor, but you can target it to a certain client demographic which you think it's going to be of particular interest to. And social media. How many of you have got Twitter feeds or run Twitter feeds? And again, push the fact that we are now offering this new probate service. And as I said, it's got to be, you know, you've got to keep chipping away. Now, if anybody's interested in looking further into this area, and certainly on the marketing side, if you are Institute members, we're running a joint event with the ICAW. There's one next week, it's full. There's 150 people on that one, it is full. But there's another one on the 22nd of June. Okay, so if you want to find more, we look more in detail at the marketing aspects. How many of you are seriously thinking about becoming accredited for probate work? Yeah. I mean, certainly, I think if I were in practice now, I would go for it. A lot of people are worried about the impact that it might have on their lawyer friends. And again, when we did our survey, those that were waiting and sort of trying to make up their minds, a lot of them put the impact that it's going to have on their relationship with lawyers in the town as being one of the top reasons for not doing it. Of the firms that responded, and we had over 100 responses from firms that are accredited and are in the process of becoming accredited, those that are accredited, only one had actually had an adverse reaction from a solicitor. Only one out of 100. None of the others had seen any noticeable reduction in referrals from lawyers. So I wouldn't necessarily let that be a stumbling block. The other thing that people are worried about is that it's a legal service, that we're not lawyers. Do we have the competence to conduct this work? Now, as with any other aspect of work, if you were doing an audit, if you were looking at FRS 102 and you weren't sure what to do, what would you do? You would consult. And the same goes for probate work. And there are lawyers out there who are more than happy to take your money to deal with a query that you might have on a legal aspect. So again, I wouldn't let that be a stumbling block for you in terms of, you know, looking at doing this work. Okay, now I've fulfilled my brief, half an hour. We've now got a quarter of an hour for any questions that anybody's got on this aspect. So it is very noisy, so I maybe, if there's anybody got any questions, I know the gentleman at the back has there, either shout very loudly or... So if we're, sorry, let me make sure I'm getting this question right. So if you're not an ICAW member and you apply to become an authorised individual, can they apply? Yes, they can. If you're CTA and if you're ACCA, we've seen a number, you know, the Institute are more than happy for you to do our exams and go through. If you're a CIMA member, then, or any other professional body, I would talk to the Institute, but what they want to do is ascertain if you have the necessary competence. And as soon as you can demonstrate that, and generally it's attending our course, then they can accredit you. But I would talk to ICAW about that. Okay. Only ICAW can authorise accountants to conduct probate work. ICAS and ACCA years ago sort of went part way to become accredited, but never followed it through. So the ICAW is the only professional body at the moment authorised to accredit accountants to do probate work. Yeah. Right, how long does it take to go through the process? The Institute on its website says a maximum of 6 months as a bit of a fallback position. On average, it's taking a couple of months. And if we did have one firm who actually took over a lawyer's probate practice because the lawyer was ill and couldn't deal with it anymore, and that got through very quickly. We were able to push that one through and get it through authorised very quickly. So on average, it's about 8 to 10 weeks before firms are coming online as accredited. Yep. Any further questions? You'll come and see me. Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention. If you're interested in looking at the course and taking that further, go see us on our stand at 8:60, and then we can chat through it with you in a bit more detail. Thank you for your attention.